Welcome, critters! I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we examine and discuss Critical Role episodes, plot lines, and characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 6, Part 2, and joining me today is Alyssa. And I just realized I didn't prepare an icebreaker question for today. So let's see. Have you already answered the kitchen appliance question?
I don't think so, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, this is one of my favorite icebreakers. So if you were a kitchen item, utensil, or appliance, what would you be?
Oh, that's a fun question. I think I would be a wooden spoon.
Oh, like one of those long wooden...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like useful for everything and just a little bit, cozy.
Yeah, it is homey. I like wooden spoons. Yeah. I love that answer. I always said a coffee mug or like a mug just by itself, because you can hold so many different things in it. Like sometimes it's coffee, sometimes it's tea, sometimes it's wine, sometimes it's whiskey, sometimes it's milk.
Whatever you want it to be.
And it's like the first thing that you unpack when you move. So it's like you always have your favorite coffee mug you have, and it's always there for you when you need it.
I like it.
Yeah, the only qualm that I have with wooden spoons is that they don't go in the dishwasher.
Oh, sure they do. Just depends on how often you want to buy them.
That is a very good point. I never considered it from that point of view. I might have to reconsider that.
They're cheap enough that I don't fight it. They go in the dishwasher.
That is such a good point. You are blowing my mind right now, because I spend so much time worrying about the dishwasher and wooden items when really you're right. They're just like, they're cheap and they're like a sustainable material. Like they can just compost. Right. So it's not like I'm wasting plastic or something by you are revolutionizing how I look at wooden spoons.
Glad I could help.
Well, thank you. So please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And as always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So comment, like, and subscribe below. Right? All right, let's dive in. So as we open this episode, well, I guess the second half of this episode, Vox Machina has just successfully broken into the Durgar stronghold castle that sits beneath the Craghammer mines, where they have come to free their ally, the paladin Kima, from prison. They are crowded in a musty storage room as Vax checks the door for traps before he starts stealthing into the hallway. He does find an empty storage room and finds another set of stairs, which he promptly descends, discovering two guards in what seems to be the prison. He returns to grab his sister Vex, and they go assassinate them together like siblings do. The whole group follows them down, and they find several rows of cells filled with a variety of bodies on a spectrum from barely alive to very dead. And they hear steps approach from above them, so they all hide in the cells and around corners, but the steps do fade. Vax finds another door, which he opens and promptly gets a great axe thrown at him from another Durgar guard. Vax retaliates but misses, and the guard closes the door again, so they all roll initiative. Percy takes a shot at the lock on the door. Vax does open the door again and steps aside, and then they see that it's actually a torture chamber, and someone is on the table, presumably in the act of being tortured, until they interrupted said torture. So Tiberius encourages violence. Keyleth accidentally kills the body that was lying on top of her in the cell that she had hid in after she morphs into Minxie form, which is her big cat. I think it's a snow leopard.
Yeah, or a white tiger.
Yeah, it's something in that white big cat range. It's one of her forms that she really does love to morph into. And she has another existential crisis about killing this body. And then Vax smacks Grog on the ass, and Grog goes hog wild and runs into the room, picks up the Duragar, and spears him on some of the meat hooks that are on the wall before grabbing his jaw and tearing it off with his bare hands in classic Grog fashion. And strapped to the torture table is Kima. It is Kima who is being tortured, and they've been looking for her this entire time, so they're super happy. Scanlan sings one of his many famous healing words to heal her up a bit. Percy shoots the locks on her manacles, and Grog finishes it off, and they free her. Tiberius gives her his magic water bottle, and they tell her that they were sent by Alora Vysoren, Kima's good friend and Vox Machina's ally back in Iman. Grog offers her a spare set of dwarf armor and a great sword. Tiberius offers her a robe, and Pike heals her up more after Kima takes her anger out on the body of the guard that they just killed. Grog is absolutely smitten with her strength and her brutality as a very muscular halfling. The halfling barbarian Goliath sizing is an interesting dynamic. Kima does convince them to help her retrieve her belongings and weapons that the Duragar had taken and stowed in the vault of the castle. So on their way up and out, they let the remaining alive prisoners out of their cells and give them water and food. But unfortunately, Kima does have a very close call in the stairwell with Clarota, the group's friendly neighborhood mind flayer. She gets super pissed at them for allying with a mind flayer, and Tiberius gets super aggressive with some fire tricks and yells back at her. Vax steps in and yells some more, and then Scanlan, of all people, steps in and threatens Kima and barely succeeds in convincing her to stay with them. And so Kima then pushes Clarota aside to leave the room after they both mutually threaten each other. And that's where the episode ends. Lots of threatening, lots of yelling.
There is so much going on in the last half of this episode.
There is. So what do we think?
So this back half of this episode is one of my favorite bits of the early campaign, but also one of the most frustrating to me. So it's this mixed bag. You know, I don't really don't understand how confrontational they are with Kima from the very beginning.
Right?
It makes no sense to me.
Yeah. That's honestly one of the themes that I wrote down in my notes is like, there are really strong loyalty themes going on here. And it's very interesting who they choose to be loyal to. There's
loyalty themes, but there's loyalty themes that don't logically make sense. Like, they're on this trip for Allura, somebody that they're dedicated to and going to great lengths for, but they're showing more loyalty to Clarota in spite of the fact that they're here for someone they're already loyal to and are therefore attacking the person that they were sent to find and should trust based off of the loyalty that they already have to someone else. It's a whole web that doesn't make any sense and frustrates me so much.
There's a lot of polarizing character decisions in this last half, which I find super fascinating. Like, I wrote down a bunch of quotes that really caught me during the episode, one of which is two are actually attributed to Tiberius. One is, I'm sauntering about, like, he makes it a point to say that he is just like lackadaisically sauntering around this stronghold. Which I'm like, it's just such a Tiberius move.
It's a choice.
A choice. And the I encourage violence phrase of his as well. I mean, that is a critter like staple nowadays. Like, I encourage violence. It has become so ingrained into the vocabulary that we use and the commonality of common language that we use when we're talking about this show. Like, it is long standing.
It's such a good quote. And I think one of the reasons I still like it, in spite of the fact that it's Tiberius's, is because it's one of the few times he actually shows support for what other people are doing instead of rushing in himself. It's him stepping back and giving Grog room to do what Grog does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the few times we see him actually be a support character in the way that a lot of the other characters fall into pretty naturally. So I think that's one of the reasons that that quote has stuck around so long and why it's still so prevalent.
Mm-hmm. I was actually wondering if Matt specifically made that prison map of his with the small dimensions in mind, because the hallways are so close that like only two people can stand next to each other at any given time. And so they cause a bottleneck in trying to get into that torture room for a lot of their movements. And so that, I think, was a huge contributing factor to a lot of these dynamics that occurred as a result in this episode. And I was wondering if that was like a conscious choice of Matt's or not.
I would say yes. I think a big part of it was him being realistic about what a prison would look like. Like, it's not going to have these big open spaces, but having such a huge party, he has to find ways to slow them down, to cause them troubles, to like use up some of their, you know, action economy, because otherwise they're going to blow through everything he puts in their path. So I think it's partially, you know, his world building, but it's also because he's, as a DM, trying to handle 8 players and find ways to make that interesting and realistic still.
Yeah, and I really think these character decisions are fascinating to look at in terms of how the game mechanics force obstacles into their path and how the characters respond to those obstacles. Like, Tiberius did very much try to go into the torture room and blow everyone up himself. But he couldn't because of action economy and the bottleneck that was happening in the space itself. And so he was then, his like plan B was to be a support role. His plan B was encouraging violence.
But for once, his plan B wasn't, you know, retro gaming and trying to like take it all back. It actually, you know, he took that step back instead of trying to, you know, cast fly and go over somebody's head or something.
Yeah, right. You
know, which, you know, prison, low ceilings probably wouldn't have worked anyway, but
he would have tried.
Exactly. I'm surprised he didn't, but in a good way.
Yeah. And another quote that I wrote down was Scanlan saying, "I go where she goes." Like, that was just, to me, one of the best relationship describing phrases between him and Pike's dynamic. Like, I find it continually fascinating how, like, I wrote this down too when it comes to Pike, like, she doesn't really engage in much relationship dynamics outside of Grog and Scanlan. And she's kind of forced into the dynamics with Scanlan for most of the campaign. It's not something that she's like actively choosing. It's more like she's responding to it. And so I just find it really fascinating that Sam has decided to base a lot of Scanlan's motivations around a very reluctant relationship dynamic.
Yeah, I don't love Pike and Scanlan. I think that their relationship dynamic is pretty uncomfortable for a lot of the campaign. So I don't know. It's one of those things, like, it sounds super romantic and it sounds like a really nice thing. And then you start thinking about the rest of their relationship dynamic and it becomes kind of questionable. And between that and Scanlan's ultimatum at the end of this, he was not my favorite character for a long time. I held both of those things against him for most of early campaign. And it really did kind of impact how I felt about the character and some of the, you know, some of the actions that he takes in upcoming arcs. And it all starts, you know, back here with some of these quotes that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think it also just really speaks to those polarizing elements that we're talking about in this episode, because Scanlan's approach to that relationship dynamic is a polarizing approach.
Yeah.
And her response is a polarizing response.
Yeah, everything about it is complicated, and it's a lot. And people have very different views on it.
Yeah. And also one thing that I wrote down that I really want to get into, I mean, not necessarily with this episode, but in later episodes, is like Keyleth. Like, I really want to get into like an examination of Keyleth, because she made some very Keyleth moves in this half of episode. Like, she talks about burying her shame as Minxie, which is also a long-standing kind of like common language phrase that goes throughout the campaigns. But her existential crisis about accidentally killing this barely alive person that she hid under, especially back to back in another episode where Vex brings up the child that she kills and the brutal killing of the Durgar guard in the lava pit leading up to this. And it's just a very interesting setting of Keyleth's psyche.
Yeah. I don't know. I looked it up. Minxie is a saber-toothed tiger, by the way.
All right,
which as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, duh. But Keyleth has some really fascinating moments in this beginning of the campaign. I think that the way that she reacts to accidentally killing that dwarf is like, I don't, okay, I guess, and moves on, is very typical Keyleth, but it also shows us a lot of like, where she's at right now. Like, I didn't mean to do this. I didn't want this to happen, but now what? Like, if things don't go according to plan, she kind of freezes in a way. And like, I get that, coming from Keyleth, coming from, a character who isn't so sure of herself. But it's definitely interesting to see it play out. And it kind of does make me question why Matt made that dwarf alive in the first place, why he made that moment happen. I'd really love to know what was going on behind the scenes there.
Yeah, because there was no indication that the dwarf was even still alive until Matt says you killed him.
Right.
So she didn't even get a choice in the matter. It was just a consequence that was handed down to her, and she had to respond to it.
Yeah. And like, I don't blame her for how she responds. She just freezes, because what would you do in that instance? Like, there's no way to actually respond to that that makes any sense, especially in such like a spur of the moment, we're running into a torture room, I can't stop to think about this kind of situation. I don't know, there's so much going on.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get further into Keyleth as we get to, there's one certain episode in Westron, I believe, in the Chroma Conclave arc that I find is just like a super fascinating example.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Of Keyleth. And so I want to wait until we get it deep into that discussion.
Yeah.
These are those beginning instances of where she ends up in those episodes.
Yeah, she's got such an arc ahead of her.
And
so revisiting these very early moments there's a lot to think about with regards to Keyleth.
Yeah, and I think it really solidifies, or I think this episode is really starting to solidify the theme of group roles too. Like, they're starting to, I don't know if this existed pre-stream or not, but at least on the stream, they're really settling down into their various group trope roles. Like, Tiberius is definitely the arrogant loaf of the group, like, and he just feeds into that very intentionally. Like, Orion as a player does feed into that very intentionally. Scanlan as the charismatic solution provider, like, he's always coming up with like solutions, but it's very much like the last minute solutions. Like,
right.
he lets everyone else try the solutions first, and then he comes in and like fixes everything.
Yeah.
Keyleth as the disregarded anxious mess.
Mm.
Like it's like, oh, that's just Keyleth having her little thing in the corner over there. Like we don't know what's going on with Keyleth, but something's going on.
Yeah.
Bax as the martyr initiator, like we see that very much.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he didn't tell anyone that he was even going down into the prison. Like he's like, I'm just gonna go check it out, and then oh shit, there's 2 guards, so I guess I'll get Bex to help me.
Yeah.
Grog is the himbo. Like he just plays up the himbo so well. He's like nice and sweet, but just a whole lot of rage. Hustle. Pike is still a bit of an outsider in the group. Like we've talked about this in previous episodes when it comes to like her physical absence, but she also has a bit of a like psychological narrative absence too that she's grappling with. And then Vex as the group's one brain cell. Like,
yes.
Yeah. The group's one brain cell. Like that's just, she's always like, guys.
Yeah. No, I think it's fun to see him kind of settle into these character bits that will continue for a long time. I don't know. One of my favorite lines from Vax is "Hold please, killing someone."
Yeah.
Because you know, it's so great in so many ways, but it's very, you know, it captures his character in a way that a lot of things don't. He's just like, you know, up ahead of the group and doing his own thing, but still in step with what the goals are. And he's very casual about it. And I like that.
Yeah. He knows what he's about. Like he is very solid in his motivations.
He knows what his job is. He's just gonna go do it.
Yeah, for sure. So what kind of personal experiences are coming to mind for us?
You know, don't have a whole lot of personal experiences that affect dungeon and torture chamber.
Oh, you've never been tortured in a prison before.
You know, not so much. But having that like new kid mentality of Kima coming into this group, and like they have a connection with her, they have a reason to want her around, but she's still very much on the outs. She's still trying to like prove herself as part of this group, and being that new kid and having to shape yourself to, you know, what the group needs of you, what the group will accept of you. That was something that I think was very relatable in a lot of ways, you know, so that feeling comes in so many life situations, you know, new school, new job, new, you know, it comes up a lot, but I related to Kimo a lot in this episode.
Yeah. And I gotta respect her for like being like, really with Mind Claire?
She like, has very valid points.
She has very valid points. And I really respect her for like standing her ground in those points. Like, I think that surprised the group, you know?
Yeah. I think they've kind of forgotten how weird it is to be allied with a Mind Flayer. And then to have an outsider come in and say, what the heck? Seriously, guys?
Yeah.
You know, that, yeah, I think it really affects how easily she can integrate herself into this group. But also, like, it should be a wake-up call for them. It needs to be a wake-up call for them.
Yeah, it needs to be.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is.
Oh, no, absolutely not. But I feel like Matt is feeding them this.
Yeah.
Like as baby food. It's like,
totally.
This is a dangerous creature, and everybody's telling you this. And they're just not picking up on it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me really wonder like what archetypes or tropes other people assign to me. Like that's what I'm thinking about, is like all of these like polarizing group roles that they're kind of settling into. Like, what is my polarizing group role? Like, that's what I want to know.
I think it's interesting, but I'm not sure I would actually want to know.
Yeah, like I kind of want to do a poll now is like, what is my trope?
One of those personality quizzes.
Well, I mean, I guess BuzzFeed will take care of it one of these days, right? Or has taken care of it. But there are so many labels that we apply both to ourselves as well as the labels that others apply to us. And like one that I've been grappling with a lot lately is introvert versus extrovert. Because I am fundamentally an introvert. I am a very outgoing, social, personable, friendly introvert.
Yeah.
I like to do a lot of content creation. Like I do tons of videos every week on a lot of different platforms. But at the end of the day, the do not disturb function on my phone and me are best friends. And the only two people, well, there's three people. The only three people that can get through that filter on my phone are my mom, my best friend, and my landlord. And like, I often get a lot of pushback from people in my business networks in particular when I label myself as an introvert, because they're so used to seeing like the plastered public persona Claire that's like all over all of my platforms. And then they're like, wait, you don't actually like people? And I'm like, no, I like people, but in small doses.
Yeah. I don't like hard labels. Like, so anything that has hard definitions, hard edges to it, they drive me crazy because nobody fits into a box.
Yeah.
So like trying to assign labels to myself or anybody else, it's not one of my favorite things. But it's super interesting to see what other people would assign to me, to, you know, to other characters, because it's always different than what I think it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a love-hate relationship with labels over the years. Like on the one hand, I'm so like non-traditional and unconventional and weird, and I like take pride in that I'm like, I can't be defined. You know, but at the same time, I want labels that do accurately define me, because I want to like succinctly describe to someone how to understand me without having to like go through the whole life story. You know?
Yeah. That's very valid. You know, they definitely have a place.
Yeah, like I've always had a love-hate relationship with it. Like on the one hand, I'm like, you can't describe me. I'm so unique. I'm a snowflake. And then on the other hand, I'm like, I'm tired of having to explain myself to people.
It all adds up in different ways.
It does. It does. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what other people label me as. I mean, lately it's just been the introvert extrovert conversation that I've been having a lot with people. But like even things like personality tests or like Myers-Briggs and astrology and human design and Enneagram and DISC and Strength Finder. Like, all of those things out there that exist to define us or help us be better understood. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So what actions are we going to take as a result?
I think one thing that really struck me was how Kima is treated, in that she's allowed to be angry, but she doesn't direct it at the people who are around her. She directs it at the people who caused her pain. So she's allowed to feel those feelings. She's allowed to be angry and violent and take it out on the, you know, the next closest quote unquote villain. They're actually villains. But she doesn't turn it towards the people around her in general. It's very specifically directed. And so I wanted to take that away from this episode as like a feel what you feel, embrace what you're feeling, but direct it in the right direction. So, you know, turn it in the direction that it deserves to be turned.
I love that so much. Like I just yes. Because like people always like use the excuse of their feelings to do bad things or to hurt people or to hurt themselves. You know, like I was feeling angry, so I did X. I was feeling sad, so I do X. And I'm like, but it's what you decide to do with the feelings. Like the feelings themselves aren't bad. It's just what you decide to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're not hurting other people and hurting yourself, I'm good with however you want to express them.
Yeah. And I loved that is something that they gave to Kima. She has every right to be angry, every right to turn on the rest of the world, but she turns it on very specific people.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that also goes into the respect that I have for Kima as a character. Like, she knows what she's about. She's upfront in her communication styles, and she's pretty well healed mentally. Like,
right? This woman is one of my heroes. Like, favorite fictional characters, favorite, people to like look up to, because she's so strong in so many ways. And a lot of that is incredible considering what she's been through. Like, there is no reason she should be as healthy as she is in so many ways, but it's amazing the way that she responds to the situation that she's in.
Yeah And we get way more into that later on in the campaign for sure, like especially around the Chroma Conclave arc, and especially with where the campaign ends up with Kima.
I love Kima so much, and having her show up was very exciting to me. So yeah, I'm happy to see more of her.
Yeah, we are Kima stans in this house. I mean, I'm being called to just talk about labels more often and how we choose to use them. Like, I've been having this conversation a lot with people, especially in the introvert extrovert realm, but I actually have a very close business friend of mine who, similar to you, just absolutely hates labels and will do everything in her power to like unlabel herself. And like, I respect it and I understand what she's trying to get to, but it's been really fascinating to watch her navigate how other people use labels around her. Like, other people will label her as something or some such, and it's just been a fascinating experience to watch her navigate that. And I think we just need to bring more self-awareness to why we feel that way, how we feel that way, what we decide to do about it, because labels are just thrown around so casually nowadays.
Yeah.
That I think we just need to be more intentional with how we use them.
Yeah. I've been thinking about them a lot lately because Pride is next month. So it's been coming up in some planning and some events that we're trying to put together for my job. And it's interesting to see the dynamic between people who really love labels as helping to define them and people who are like, I don't want to be defined by a word. And there's definitely that kind of dynamic, and we're trying very hard to find ways to work around each other in ways that kind of support the needs of the people who love labels and the needs of people who just don't want them around. And I think that especially being in that community, you see it a lot. And I think that it's a very clear dichotomy in some ways.
And there's a lot of gatekeeping with labels in that community as well, which is also fascinating.
I could go off on a tangent about that, but I'm not gonna do that.
I'm like, man, we need another like half hour to like delve into that whole label necklace mess.
Yeah, let's just head that off there. But yeah, it's definitely a conversation that comes up in various spaces.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really does. And, you know, now that you say that about the LGBTQ plus IA, so on and so forth, labels, like, I was thinking about gatekeeping, and like gatekeeping even applies in like whether you label yourself as a gamer or not. Like it can even boil down to, like, for me, which is such like a irrelevant thing, like whether you call yourself a gamer or not isn't really like a groundbreaking proclamation. But
Right.
yeah, it's just fascinating. Labels, gatekeeping, all of it.
Complicated messes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the overarching themes of Critical Role and this Sacred Reading CR podcast that we've created is like, life is messy. People are messy. And Critical Role is just a perfect mirror of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Life is a mess, and that's okay.
And yet we still persevere. And yet we still survive and thrive and laugh and cry and mourn and, you know, celebrate. But it's worth examining those messy, tangled necklace balls.
Yeah. There's so much good that comes out of the mess. It's always worth it.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. All right. Anything you want to add before we wrap up for today?
I think I'm good.
Yeah. Well, per usual, these are powerful themes that we're talking about here. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own stories and insights and perspectives with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you in your own lives. Special thanks to Alyssa for joining me on this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure, per usual.
Yeah, anytime. I'm always happy to be here.
And next time, Petal will be coming back to talk about Campaign 1, Episode 7. I don't even know what episode we're on anymore. 7, Part 1. And I'm super excited to dive into it more. And I'm always looking for more co-hosts and guests. So if you're interested in coming on this show and sharing your perspectives, please reach out to me either via email or on Tumblr, and I'll send you the sign-up form. I can't wait to chat with all of you. You all bring different perspectives, and I absolutely love it. In the meantime, please comment, like, and subscribe below. Follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR for all the juicy updates. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and always, always, always remember to love each other. Take care, guys.
Bye.